week. I'm delighted to be joining you from kind of slightly muggy North London today. So do let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know what the weather is. Always like to know what the weather is all around the world. So I'm your host for today. I'm Rose Staveley Wadham. We've got the lovely Ellie in the comments, so please do say hello to Ellie. And I can just see a few people joining. Hello, Roz from a sunny and hot Massachusetts. We'd like some sunshine over here, please, across the pond. It's cloudy with Ellen in Roscoe, Illinois. Gillian is in a sunny Edinburgh, and Andrea is for cloudy Stoke-on-Trent. Kim in a sunny West Yorkshire. We've got Andrea joining. Lovely to see you all. We seem to have quite a distribution of the weather today. We've got Rosie joining from Shropshire, and Jane from Lancashire, Janet from North Wales, Shirley over on YouTube from Cambridgeshire. Hot and humid. I'm feeling the humidity. My hair's been quite frizzy. I've had to tame it for today. We've got Andrew, warm and sunny in Lancashire. Jenny's in a sunny Devon. Heather, Georgia, from lovely. And it's a lovely sunny afternoon, but a bit windy in Essex. So we've got a bumper week for you as ever. We've even got a little a mini quiz for you today, which is going to test your Derbyshire knowledge. So stay tuned for that. And we're also going to be looking at the women who worked on the canals during the Second World War. So they were known as the land girls of the canal. So we're going to look at their incredible but not often told stories. And we've got a question of the week, which is, when was the moment that you realised that you were hooked on family history? So the question of the week, when was the moment that you realised that you were hooked on family history? Okay, we'll come back to that. And one thing we'd love to flag today, we've got a really exciting competition. So it's a chance for you, that's you, to start in your own video about your own family history journey. So going around the United Kingdom on your own road trip, going to all the places that mean a lot to your family history. So giving you sort of the chance to star in your own family history show. So I think Ellie will share the link for this to enter this competition. All you need to do is to share your unique story and or discoveries with us. And yeah, Ellie, thank you. There's the link there. So just click through the link there. It's a really, really exciting competition. I'd like to enter, but I can't because that would be totally unfair. Yeah, definitely have a go at entering that one. And I'm really excited to see that when that comes out. So yeah, I'm seeing some more people joining as well. We've got Karen, she's looking forward to some new Derbyshire records for Derbyshire ancestors. We've got Ted, he's joining in from London, Ontario, and Robert's in Dorset, Anya, lovely and sunny in Fife, as Susan. Welcome one and all. So let's have a dive into new records of the week. And this is our menu. And we've got a lovely Derbyshire focus this week. We've got over 400,000 new records joining our Derbyshire baptisms, marriages and burials. So we've got a huge time frame here as well. So we're going all the way back to 1510, all the way up to 2004. So we've got a huge range for you here. So we've really got your Derbyshire ancestors covered, ancient and modern. And we've also got 8 of our newspapers have been updated this week. So that's nearly 200 years of headlines there from 1780 through to 1979. So we're covering an awful lot of history this week. And yeah, so we're going to do something a little bit different this week. I've put together a little Derbyshire quiz because I realised when we look at these counties, sometimes I don't actually know too much about them. And Derbyshire is a lovely county. I've been there a few times. It's home to over 1 million people, and it's famous for its industrial connections. It's beautiful countryside, the Peak District. It's beautiful stately homes like Chatsworth. And you can see some of some historical pictures from Derbyshire here from our photo collection. There is Eccles Mill there in the centre, pictured in 1933. And on the right there, you can see some evacuees from the Kent and Sussex coast at Belper railway station in the June of 1940. Okay, so we're just going to do this multiple choice quiz. Unfortunately, there's no prizes. I can't offer any prizes, but it's just the joy of taking part. So you please do answer in the comments, and we'll get straight to it. And our first question is Derbyshire home to A, England's first public baths, B, England's first public library, or C, England's first public park? I'll just repeat that. Is Derbyshire home to A, England's first public baths, B, England's first public library, or C, England's first public park? A little time to consider that. And Anya used to live in Derbyshire. Okay, so we've got Ellen coming in with a B, and William, C, the park. And yeah, I can reveal it is C, the park. I did not know this, that Derbyshire is actually home to England's first public park, and it is called the Derby Arboretum, and it was the first specially designed urban park in Britain. So it was commissioned and designed by Joseph Strutt for the people of Derby in 1840. So the aim was to create a sort of botanical tree garden, which could be educational, but as well as provide a place for leisure. And it's depicted here in the Illustrated London News from our newspaper collection in July 1854. And just about see there's sort of tiny engraving up there, which reads, Arboretum given to this town by Joseph Strutt in 1840. Okay, so question number 2. Was Derbyshire the place of A, the first astronomer royal, B, the first astrophysicist royal, or C, the first astrologer royal? Okay, repeat that again. So that's question number 2, which is, was Derbyshire the birthplace of A, the first astronomer royal, B, the first astrophysicist royal, or C, the first astrologer royal? Give you a little time to answer. We've got Kim with B answering there. Andrew's going for A. William concurs, Janet also with an A. Andrew going for C. Ellen, astronomer, and Ellen is quite correct. It is the first astronomer royal, and I don't think the others are necessarily positions. I think it'd be quite cool if the royal family had an astrologer and do all the. I suppose they would have had someone doing their horoscopes back in the day, but I'm not sure King Charles has a royal astrologer now. So the answer is the first astronomer royal, and he was a chap called John Flamsteed, who was pictured here by the Illustrated London News in the 1970s. So he was actually born in Denby in Derbyshire in 1646, and he was famed. He created a star atlas, and he was actually the first astronomer to make recorded observations of Uranus, but he incorrectly identified it as a star. And he also was famous as he laid the foundation stone for the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, and he was appointed the King's Astronomical Observator by Charles II in 1675, and he had an allowance of £100 a year. So very, very clever man, and one of Derbyshire's famous sons. Just a side note, if you're interested in astronomers, please do have a read of my special blog, which is all about early women astronomers, so going all the way back into the 18th century. So final question of our mini quiz. I think you've all been doing pretty well. Is Derbyshire home to A, the world's first railway station, B, the world's first factory, or C, the world's first shopping centre? So final question of our little quiz. Is Derbyshire home to A, the world's first railway station, B, the world's first factory, or C, the world's first shopping centre? Yeah, and just straight in with B. Robert's also in with B. Andrew's in with B. I think you're a very knowledgeable crew. Yeah, it is factory. It is factory because Derbyshire is known for those industrial connections. So unsurprisingly, it's factory, and this factory was known as Loam's Mill. And Loam's Mill was a silk throwing mill, which was built on an island in the River Derwent in Derby between 1717 and 1721. So by a chap called Thomas Loam. So he'd actually been over to Italy and sort of seen the processes of silk production. So he decided to bring it home to Derbyshire. And this is is touted as the sort of world's first industrial espionage, which led to the creation of this first fully working factory in the world. And it would go on to form the model for the factory concept, which was developed in Derbyshire by Derbyshire resident Richard Arkwright. And William and Andrew, because I didn't know this, supplying some knowledge around the railway stations. The first station was in Manchester. And yeah, so this is just a little picture. Loam's Mill doesn't actually stand still. I think there was lots of factories that were actually built on this site, but there is an incarnation of the factory still there, which is shown in the Derby Evening Telegraph. Okay, well done everybody, and let's move on to our records of the week. Okay, so we've got Derbyshire baptisms, and we've got over 230,000 of these joining our collection. So these span from 1524 all the way through to 1991, and I love to look at the early ones when we have these dates, these tantalising dates, and this one is for Edward Straw, who was baptised in June 1524. So we're talking reign of Henry VIII. He's still married to Catherine of Aragon, so none of that business with Anne Boleyn going on. So really, really a very long time ago. And Edward Straw here, he's baptised in the village of Pinxton, and we get the names of his parents, James Straw and Mary Straw. So we really get a nice level of detail contained in these baptism records. So these new records that we've added this week, they are transcript only, but as you can see, they contain an awful lot of detail within the transcripts. And this is an example from the marriages, and we've got over 57,000 brand new records joining our Derbyshire marriages this week, and they range from 1510 all the way through to 2004. And I just pulled this one out from December 1903. We get a lot of detail here. It's for the marriage of Beatrice Sarah Jane Aberley to Henry Henson in the village of Callow. And we've got so many details. The name of the church, we've got the names of Beatrice and Henry's fathers have been transcribed in this set too. And it's interesting for Henry, it's at least a second marriage. He's noted as being widowed, he's 48, and Beatrice is 37 and single. So married sort of a little bit later on in life there. And yeah, it's the transcript there. It's really bursting full of information. And the same is true as the burial records. And we've added 110,000 of these this week. And they span the years 1539 through to 1997, and this is the burial record for Elizabetta Staveley from 1707. So Elizabetta, I'm thinking it could be a Latinized version here, and Elizabeth Staveley was buried in Castleton. I searched Staveley. There is a town in Derbyshire called Staveley. I'm a Cumbrian Staveley. There's a town in Cumbria called Staveley, so it's no relative to me. But I thought I'd have a look at the Staveleys in Derbyshire. So we also see in this record Elizabetta's parents' names. So when we see this in a burial record, we could infer that she was potentially an infant or a child at this time. They're having those parents' names there. And her father, he is sort of quite an interesting one there. I don't know if you can see Extophori. So you've got that X there. It's quite unusual. If you sort of think about that, X is the abbreviation that we sort of still have for Xmas or Christmas. So we've got Christopher here, and the mother is also Elizabetta. So yeah, these are some really great records to dig into, and there's such a wealth of time frame as well within them. So do enjoy having a browse through those. And just going to leave Derbyshire behind now. I've enjoyed our little adventure into Derbyshire, but we're going to look at just quickly the 8 updated newspapers, I should say, this week. So we're always adding new pages to our newspaper collections, and this week we've had lots of updates. So I think just over 100,000 pages this week. So this week we actually go all the way back to 1780 with the Bath Chronicle, and we're going all the way up to actually I think I said 1979, but I think actually we go up to the 1990s. My apologies, with the Lichfield Post. So actually we do have over 200 years of headlines there. And we've got some updates to one of our Welsh titles. We've got the year 1912 joining the South Wales Echo, and we've also got updates to one of our Irish titles, the Wexford and Kilkenny Express, and that's for the year 1900. And we've also got big updates this week to the Huddersfield Daily Examiner, and those newspaper pages are all from the 1970s this week. We've got another big update to the Daily Chronicle, and I've been learning quite a bit about this newspaper. It's got a really fascinating history. It grew out of a small London title in the sort of 1880s, and by the 1890s, it actually became one of the country's best-selling daily national newspapers. It was a really big title, and it's not around today. It was bought by Prime Minister David Lloyd George in 1918. It sort of had decline of fortunes in the 1920s, and it was merged with the Daily News in 1930 to form the News Chronicle, which then passed out of existence in the 1960s. So a really fascinating title there that was at one time one of the biggest national newspapers in the country. So that's enough for newspapers. I mean, for now, we can never have enough newspapers. We know that. So I see some answers coming through already to the question of the week, which is, when was the moment you realised that you were hooked on family history? So when was the moment you realised that you were hooked on family history? I'll just take this away, and I'm going to look through. So actually, before we get onto this, I'll just explain about how I became hooked on family history. Findmypast is key to my family history journey. A very long time ago, I think it must have been in 2014, my mum handed me an advert in the paper, and it was for a free trial for Findmypast, and I just got hooked. I've always been sort of interested in it, and my mum's always been very interested in family history, and she'd always have like little trees like noted down on paper. But to build a tree and to search these records, I just got absolutely hooked, and I loved it. And a few months later, I was so hooked. I didn't have a job at the time, and I wrote a letter to Findmypast and asked, "Oh, do you have any jobs going?" And they did, and the rest is history. So that's my little story there. And I would just go through. I'm just scrolling through to there's William. So William just is guessing in 2001. I think he did something in year 6, and then from then on, I've always been looking into it as the story started getting told by grandparents, and I love that. That's like the sort of vivid. You can picture those stories, and my grandparents were great storytellers as well, and I just really keep those precious memories, which really bring your family history research to life. Rosie here, 2006, about 4 a.m, when I realised that my first foray on a genealogy site wasn't going to be the last. Oh, I love that. And it's the stuff that keeps us up at night. It's the puzzle solving element, I think, and we'll sort of touch on that a little bit later. And that is just that hooks you in, and you have to keep on finding out more and more and more, and then before you know it, it's 4 a.m. in the morning. And Andrew, he says, when I predicted where an ancestor would have been baptized, looked at the microfilm and found him such a buzz. Oh, wonderful stuff. So actually sort of going through the microfilm, that's a wonderful experience. And we've got Jean. She started in Alice 17 years ago when my daughter married a South African. And oh wow, so her parents gave Rob a copy of his family tree, and seeing my daughter was living there, I thought any grandchildren in the future would lose their family history from their mother's side. Oh wow, okay, so that, you know, and that's like a kind of an event, and Jean's been working on the family tree ever since. So, you know, an event sort of precipitating one's interest into family history. And Janet, I can't recall, but it was when I started looking at the records of all Corrie people, not just my own line of Corries. This is it, isn't it? You know, once you know, you've maybe exhausted your own family tree, it's that pleasure of exploring someone else's family story. And I've basically done all of my friends' family trees. So I think it's kind of useful having that genealogist friend. So I've been able to clear up the family mysteries of some of my friends, which is always a pleasure to do. Ellen became hooked when she started travelling 20 plus miles weekly to the nearest local family history centre to look at and order microfilm records. And that's a commitment. That time, you know, the travel, and that, you know, they really got the bug then. See some other ones. And Georgia, this is, when I found my great-grandparents on the 1981 census, and then looked for other branches of my tree on that census. And there's something about being able to sort of see those records. I think that's very much my journey, is being seeing those names in the census, and then thinking, oh, can I go back? Who can I find? And then also comparing to like where we are today. So, for example, I found a lot of my relatives used to live in London, and sort of I love to sort of go back through the streets and sort of see what they might have seen or not seen changes. And we've got Gillian. So about 2 to 3 weeks when I realised I was hooked, started talking with some friends about grandparents and such like. Did my first ever search of records in the Register House here in Edinburgh, and that was it. Hook, line and sinker. Wonderful. Gina, and this is interesting because we've, you know, there's the sort of the physical, there's the sort of physical research, traveling to archives, but the advent of the internet. And as Gina says, I think that's when we got the internet. I found an extended family tree for my husband's family online. So that sort of opens up a whole other realm of discoveries. Oh, I love this from Mary. Hello, from Mary, who's in Cape Town. Hello, and thanks to the census records, I was able to see the home my grandmother grew up in Hammersmith. This is what I was just saying about London on my last trip to the UK in April. As I walked down the street, I could smell the blossoms. I imagined it was my grand's perfume. Oh, I've got goosebumps. It was a truly surreal experience for me, and I was absolutely emotional. I can really imagine that, and I've actually got me welling up a bit there, because I can really understand that, and that's something so sort of potent about scent, and, you know, maybe there's the same sort of smell as well. And thank you for sharing that, Mary. I'm tearing up. I'm emotional. See what any other ones we've got on. Yeah, I wanted to start doing it for a while. So as soon as we started in 2009, I was hooked. Who Do You Think You Are was already on TV, and I really wanted to know more about my own roots. And programs like that can really get you into family history and get you that bug. And Ellie, when I started working at Findmypast, and now what Ellie doesn't know about family history isn't worth knowing. And Karen, finding my Brown family Bible, which was impossible to do before that, and that's wonderful to have that kind of I'm going to call it a relic, maybe just that's, you know, that kind of repository. That is so wonderful to have. And Kim, she took a DNA test and discovered my great-grandfather's secrets. Intriguing. I'd researched him so much. I dreamed of him. Oh, wow. I wonder if this is a common thing within the genealogist community. I'd love to know. Dreaming of ancestors. And we've got on YouTube, I go San Victor, when I found the name of my father's 13 uncles were killed in World War I. Wow, when all I had to go on was the surname of Smith, and place of birth is Wolverhampton. So finding those needles in the haystack, that is, you know, testament to sort of one's staying power. What an amazing discovery. And Obscene Moon started in 2007, and was still up on building the tree at 2-3 a.m. when I had work the next day. This late night thing, this is a theme. And Beth, she started about 16, dipped in and out, and got seriously back into it just before the pandemic. Amazing. Sorts of amazing answers. It's so interesting. And find out how everybody got hooked. Heather, as told as a child, I was always asking questions about the family. First visit to Register House in Edinburgh over 45 years ago, pre-computers, and I was hooked. Now my drug of choice. Yes. I concur. And was another DNA test as a way of getting in, and discovered it's over 50% Irish. I always thought I was just English, and so ever since I've been going down rabbit holes and hitting brick walls. And as we know, Irish genealogy can be challenging. I was disappointed in my DNA test. I didn't register as anything Irish. I'm 2% Welsh. I'm very proud of my 2% Welsh. I flatter you, Ellie, of course. It's all true. And Beth, just not sure when she got hooked, but grew up hearing stories. Oh, wait, sorry, I've just shared that one. This is good. Share it again. It was so good. And then finally, Karen. Had my son in 2003, and 2 years later, I started looking into my family history because I wanted it to be something I passed down to my son one day. I love that. My dad found some old documents under the stairs that he didn't know about. And I had my first visit to the Old Record Centre in Farringdon and the big sorting office near there the other day, and I love searching through the old books. Amazing. And Christy and Carol, when I married my mum told me that my great grandma was a Carol from Ireland, but she didn't know much about her, so I tried to find out, but very little info back in the day. 50 years on, I've now researched 3 times great grandparents in Ireland, but it's only with access to vast internet information available in the past few years, and that does open up a world of possibilities. And I actually have a friend who's an Irish Carol, so Christine, you might be related. And yes, Anya, being part I'm very proud of my 2% Welshness through my Watkins line. So no, I'm very proud to be Welsh, even though it's just 2%. Okay, brilliant. And William Shaw DNA tests they can be difficult to prove. I mean, there are the ones that, there's one that says I'm Tuscan, 5% Tuscan, and that might be just sort of a similarity in the DNA. So it's sort of important to remember it's sort of not an exact science, although it does give us really handy pointers. Perfect. Okay, so and we sort of touched on this a little bit, and one of the most frustrating but kind of addicting elements of family history, I think, are those brick walls. We talk about brick walls a lot because they are the things that keep you coming back time again, trying to solve. These are the ones that keep you up till the early hours of the morning, and sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you just can't solve them. They are so tantalizing, and they can be just so frustrating when they can't be shifted. So I thought today we'd share that pain of when you have a brick wall that just doesn't break, and I'm really sure that we have all been there. So I'm going to look at sort of using information that we don't have to help us, at least in some way, to somehow fill in those blanks. And so to do this, I'd love to introduce you to my particular genealogical nemesis, who is Mary Vaughan-Tress. So please, as we go along, do let us know about your sort of nemesis, as it were, your sort of brick wall, and your hints and tips for breaking down brick walls. And I'm sure you'll probably be able to help me with this. So Mary Vaughan-Tress, who is she? What is she to me? Well, she is my fiancé's great-great-grandmother, and she married a man called Edward Goodall, and the family were based in London. So she was born in the mid to late 19th century. So far, so good. You wonder why. I bet you're wondering why she's my nemesis. So let's continue. So we can trace Mary Vaughan-Tress under her married name of Mary Goodall, and go through from the top. Got the 1939 register here at the top. the wonderful thing about 1939 is that it records the date of birth. So that is so useful, especially when going back, and we'll see why this comes in use as well. So her birthday is the 11th of January, 1873. She's recorded as undertaking unpaid domestic duties, whilst her husband, Edward, who was born in 1871, is a public house bar cellarman. So he's working in the pub trade. And next up is that middle clipping, and it's from the 1921 census. And Edward isn't with Mary. Mary is enumerated with 3 of her 4 children, Frederick, Elsie and Doris. She is again undertaking home duties, whilst her 3 children, who range in age from 15 to 25, are all in employment. So they're all working from a young age. And they're based in Brixton. And in 1911, 10 years before, they're not too far away in Herne Hill. So they're based in South London. And this time, Edward is with his family. He's a cellarman, so he sort of kept that career for many years. And the couple's eldest son is Frederick, and he is a laboratory assistant. Just say hi to Lynn, who's joining. Sorry, she's late. Welcome. We're exploring some brick walls. So far, we do know quite a bit about Mary Vaughandress. And we know that she was born on the 11th of January, 1873 in King's Cross or Islington. So she states these on her census return, so in 1921 and 1911 respectively. So King's Cross is kind of in the Islington area, so that works. That's okay. Not too concerned there. And we get her maiden name of Vaughandress from her 1895 marriage to Edward Goodall, which took place in Holborn. So this is an interesting point. Edward Goodall spends most of his life south of the river. He's from Dulwich, and the family eventually settle in Brixton, South London. But Mary is born north of the river. I mean, it's not too far away geographically, but she's based north of the river. We also know that Mary has 4 children with Goodall, and that she has a long life, a really long life. She died in 1969 in Camberwell. But, and it's a big but, and this is why she is my nemesis. So if you search for Mary Vaughandress, you will only receive quite literally one result, only one result. There is only one record for Mary Vaughandress, and that is that marriage record to Edward. So I've got questions. And Karen, I live up the road from where your nemesis live in Herne Hill. It's a lovely part of the world. Yeah, my questions. Where was she in the 1881 and 1891 censuses? Where is her birth record? And we should, we've got pointers to this. We know that she should be born in London, and we've got an exact date of birth, so that's helpful. And who are Mary's parents? Now, it'd be interesting then. How would you tackle this? And the first element for me is that name. It's unusual, isn't it? It's a corruption of something. Potentially a non-standard English name, sort of von something, or even something like with a W or an F, Vaughandress or Ventress. Interesting. So we can use the records that we have to dig into this name a little bit more, and we can look at where she's used that name before, and where that name will come up is in the registering of the births of her children. So when you register the birth of a child, you register the mother's maiden name. So we see this is her son Thomas, her 3rd child, his birth record, and that's from 1904, and we see clear as day there, mother's maiden name, Vaughandress. And yeah, exactly. Geo there, maybe German style Vaughandress. Yeah, that's something I'm definitely thinking with this surname. So she's used, that's the name. This name Vaughandress is something that she goes by. That's what she calls herself. And I also obtained her marriage certificate through the GRO. And the handwriting is fairly tricky, as always, but it's Vaughandress. That's what she's written in her marriage certificate. Even though this name it's not coming up anywhere else. So this is where we can use our wonderful wildcard searches and name variant searches. So if you use that for Mary Vondress and you use the name variants, you tick that box with the birth year of 1873, we get the birth record for a Mary Vondress. So I'm like, this is good. This sounds promising. And she's born in Islington. So we know that, she's Islington based in Q1. So that's going to be either January, February, March of 1873. So this is promising. So to make sure that this is the right woman, the right lady that I'm looking at, I ordered the birth certificate from the GRO. Again, comes as a PDF, nice and really quite easy to do. And this confirms it. So you remember we have her birth date from the 1939 register. It matches. So it goes, it's the 11th of January, 1873. So this is Mary. We have her birth certificate. Hooray. And so with the birth certificate, it means we get the name of her parents. So that was one of the questions I wanted to answer. So we get Frederick Vondress, and that also incidentally matches the name in the marriage certificate, although it's recorded as Frederick Vondress. And the name of her mother as well, Elizabeth Vondress, brackets formerly Gilbert. And we also get the address of where she was born, 14 Caledonia Street, and the birth was registered in Islington. So Caledonia Street actually exists to this day, and it is right by King's Cross railway station. So hence why she said that she was born in King's Cross. And I was actually there last night, so I had a little walk down that street, and oh my word, I think we were discussing earlier about going back to those places that your ancestors would have frequented. And even though, the Mary's not a direct ancestor of mine, I just found it, quite a moving experience to sort of stand under that same patch of sky. And most of the buildings are brand new. So yeah, really, really lovely experience. If you can, definitely worth going. And we also learned about her father's profession. So he was a barman in 1873. So he's in the pub trade. So that's a bit like her husband, Edward. And there are some pubs on Caledonia Street today that still stand that perhaps Frederick could have worked at. But the marriage certificate, his profession is really difficult to read. I think I can make out something gilder, so it's a bit tricky. So far we have we've got information about Mary. So we've got her parents' names, Frederick and Eliza. And we've got the addresses at the time of her marriage and her baptism. We've got her father's occupations and witnesses at her wedding, for example, as well as the 1901 census, which we'll have a look at together in a second. But the reason why she is my brick wall, and I suppose Frederick is, and her mother Eliza by extension are as well, is that I cannot find her in the 1881 and 1891 census. I cannot find her parents. I cannot find a record of her parents' marriage as well. And the surname Vondress doesn't want to exist. So what to do in these scenarios? Well, I would advise working with all of that information you have in different ways. And if we pick it apart, you can see that I do have so much information. I am very lucky to have all of these points. So there is something here for me to work with. So, we've touched on it previously. So using wildcard searches. So, you can enter an asterisk and then, part of a surname. So like asterisk RESS if I wanted to search for something that ended in dress or res or s, and just if that beginning of that name was corrupted, or looking through census records using keywords or occupations of the person that you are looking for. So, combining what you have, looking through census records and using the occupation field to search barman, for example, or using the other person listed in the household. So you could search for Mary, but then look for a Frederick in the same household. And I think I've got some great suggestions coming through here. Again, Angela, could parents can marry Broadson's father's name sounds Austrian or German? Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a possibility, and somewhere to sort of expand that search. Yes. So yeah, and doing these various tactics, sadly, didn't bring me my Frederick. Actually, um, sadly. So again, there is of course the option that he was abroad, or and actually with an interesting suggestion here, the hard F in Welsh is often anglicised to a V, a line to follow. Now that's very interesting. I haven't actually done much on F's. I've sort of tried W, so I'm gonna lovely food for thought. This is the hive mind working, guys. This is what we love, coming together to solve these mysteries. And William, newspaper searches exactly are another good way of trying to break these brick walls. So there are, and there are sort of other tactics to use. We have the address of where Mary was born. So that is in Caledonia Street. And you can use the fantastic address search to find census records. So popped in Caledonia Street, and I've chosen the 1881 census. So, Mary was born in 1873. It's not ideal, 1881, but they might have moved on. But, it's something to explore. So I searched for Caledonia Street, added the location as London. And this is sort of a bit more manual. I was browsing through the street here, looking to see if there are any names that have been corrupted. If that sort of fit the bill. And of course, you can be more exacting with your search, looking at searching census records with a combination of names and date and birth dates to try and limit down results. But frustratingly, this didn't work for me. But what this does, looking through the streets of where your ancestors lived, it does reveal the type of people that they would have lived and worked amongst, and that sort of the Cecile makeup, like that fabric of what their lives was actually like, which that is still so valuable to have a picture of. So we have smiths and bricklayers and laundresses and mantle makers living in Caledonia Street in the 1881 census. So these people working with their hands, they're mainly working class people. Most were born in London, but others were born further afield. So Mary was born into this melting pot. And, looking at the wonderful booths maps, the poverty maps, you can actually see that this area at the time was one of the poorest in London. So, with this in mind, we can kind of imagine if there was if extreme poverty is a factor here, this might shroud Mary's family. And of course, we mentioned it, newspapers. I've tried searches for Frederick and Mary and haven't found anything yet. And I say yet because we are always adding new newspaper pages, and there are those different search tactics that I'm going to try as well. But I searched for 14 Caledonia Street, which is where Mary was born, and I found this little advert from the late 1870s. And it's an advert placed by T. Howie of 14 Caledonia Street in King's Cross. And he's looking for a situation as a photography assistant. So I love that in the 1870s, photography was quite a new thing, and he's looking, or he or she doesn't specify, that they're looking for a job as a photography assistant. And so these suggestions could have been interned in World War One, of German descent. Yeah, this is a good place to have a look. Yes, so we've got T. Howie here for 14 Caledonia Street, and T. Howie wouldn't have been the only person living at 14 Caledonia Street. So quite appropriately, in 1881, there are 14 people living at 14 Caledonia Street. So it would have been a squeeze, I imagine, spread across 5 different families. So sadly, Mary and her family had moved on by this point. So we still have other options. This is, a good tip is to look at the witnesses on the marriage certificates. There was John Long. He was a bit harder to track down. The other, Edward Bolton Pocket, wonderful name, was a little easier to track down. So I was looking to see if there was any connection to Mary's side of the family. The connection was not actually to Mary, but her husband, Edward. Edward Pocket was Edward Goodall's brother-in-law, and he married his sister Julia a year before in 1894. So nothing to be gleaned from the Vaughan dresses there. And one thing we hadn't scrutinised yet is the 1901 census, and this was slightly unusual. So by this point, Edward and Mary had been married for about 6 years, and they had 2 children, but their 2 children aren't actually enumerated with them. And we've got Frederick and Elsie, and they are enumerated with their aunt, Julia Pocket, and their other aunt, Agnes Goodall. So Edward Goodall is enumerated alone. He is working as a potman / sort of barman. And interestingly, Mary is working as a general servant in the home of a silversmith, Reginald Peel. So of course, as we know, censuses are just a snapshot in time. It doesn't mean this is a permanent situation, but to me, it does suggest that money was tight. That the mother Mary, even though married, she was in a live-in position as a domestic servant. So to me, it does suggest that, there was difficulty with money. The family unit couldn't stay together. And I wonder again if money was an issue. If the family had to be split up, and that's why they can't be found together. Perhaps her parents were never married. There was some difficulty there, which again would explain the lack of that traditional family unit that can't be tracked down. Perhaps there was trouble with the law. Perhaps there were pseudonyms involved. Of course, there is the option that they were abroad, and we have sort of talked about those European options. But if they were abroad, Mary has these ties to London. My instinct is that at least in the 1880s, early 1890s, that Mary and her parents, or Mary at least, were sort of hidden away in the back streets of London. That's my instinct. But I think from this, I've got so much more sort of food for thought with the possible Welsh connection and to explore the sort of German or Austrian angle. So thank you. I will keep you updated as to my search for Mary Vaughantress. But I think what we can do is, even though we can't push back beyond Frederick at the moment, we can kind of paint that picture of their lives using census records, newspaper reports. So we do get that sense of how they lived, even if we don't have those exact facts and figures. And I'm not going to stop trying to break this brick wall. And I think we can all empathise with that. That is the joy of family history, that we keep coming back to try and solve something. And it is, I was sat here, I was like, I am banging my head against quite literally a brick wall. So yeah, how are we doing to time? Yeah, I think I've got time. So what I'd like to do now is just quickly going to on to something completely different, to tell some story of some fantastic women, some wonderful women known as the Idle Women, and these were the women canal workers of the Second World War. And I've actually written a blog on these fantastic ladies, and Ellie, if you'd be kind enough to share that link. But first things first, where did this idle nickname come from? Because they were far from idle. These women, they worked on the canals during the Second World War. They wore badges with the initials IW, which stood for Inland Waterways. So these actually became corrupted into a nickname, Idle, which was given to them by the boatmen that they worked alongside. So I want to sort of shine a light on these women and show how, though we might not have a sort of an exact record set devoted to them, we can find out more about them and their hard work using our newspapers and the other records that we can find on Findmypast. But just briefly, a little background on them and how canals were really important during the Second World War, as they could be used to transport vital supplies around the country like coal. And we have an article here just on the right there from the Aberdeen Evening Express from November 1942, which outlines canals saved the important petrol and rubber supply. So they were quite, they were a good way of transporting supplies around without consuming vital supplies themselves. But there was a problem. And in October 1942, the Birmingham Mail explained how there was a shortage of labour for canal wharves and crews. But that gap was being filled. It was being filled by women, and this was still quite a fresh idea. A year before, in 1941, you can see that little clipping on the left-hand side there. An MP called A.P. Herbert stated his belief that women would be quite strong enough to undertake canal work, exclaiming why they are already doing it. They were already working on the canals, but there were some naysayers, and we learned from this article in the Hartlepool Northern Daily Mail that an official from the Grand Union Canal Company said, "We do not consider that the average woman would be fit for this work. This is why we're having to turn down a large number of applications from them. We doubt if women would be strong enough." Okay, rude. And he imagined this situation, another official imagined a situation. He was from the Transport Ministry. And he imagined a scenario where a woman canal worker would go to open a lock gate, but instead of being able to open the lock, they would just have to sit down and wait until somebody came to help them. So frustrating, this historical sexism. But as ever, wartime proved an absolute antidote to prejudice. And by 1942, women were being trained to work barges on the Grand Union Canal. So by 1944, the press were actively advertising the need for women to volunteer to operate canal boats. And the Scotsman there on the left-hand side gave its readers an idea of what a woman could expect whilst working on the canals. So this is from March 1944, and it says, if found suitable, trainees are given a control of a pair of boats consisting of a motorboat with a butty. Earnings accruing from the tonnage are shared by the 3 members of the crew and are subject to a minimum wage of £3 a week. Canal boat workers are entitled to extra rations of tea and sugar. Only women of robust constitution are advised to apply. And other requirements, according to the Ministry of War Transport, were grit and the spirit of service. And Anya, as quite correctly said, damsels in distress, they were not. These women were not. So in the same month, the Daily Herald produced a profile of the 18 women who had volunteered for service on the Grand Union Canal. And it was a life that they dubbed as tough but jolly. Now, these women, they were engaged in taking valuable cargoes from London to Birmingham and Nottingham. And actually, they came from across the world. So they came from New Zealand, they came from Australia, Patagonia, evening, and Mexico, as well as closer from home. And one of the women was 29-year-old Anne Blake from Devon, and she told the Daily Herald, "The life is tough. You've got to be prepared to lump it. But it was obviously the life for me because I like open air." And what is really great about these articles is you get the names, the ages, and sometimes the home places of these women. So this helps us to tell their story. And we also, as well as just learning more about their daily routine. So their day would start at 6 o'clock, which involved cooking your breakfast and probably steering the boat at the same time, opening lock gates every 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour and not tying up until dusk. So they were long days, and they would often complete 2 trips in 5 days. They would live, eat and sleep in a cabin, which measured 10 by 7 foot, and then they would receive 3 days leave. And this is a wonderful picture here of the Canal Women at Work, as published by The Sphere in 1944. So it shows Audrey Harper, who was aged 22 and a former nurse from Birmingham, operating a barge pole, and just about make out Evelyn Hunt looking on. She was a former camouflage research worker from Hammersmith. Interesting job. And it wasn't just the Grand Union Canal, I should say, that women were working on. In January 1945, the Liverpool Evening Express advised that women volunteers to work the barges on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal should apply at 74 Pall Mall, Liverpool. It was a Ministry of War Transport backed scheme, and women were invited to undertake 2 months of training. And they should be between the ages of 20 and 35, and I quote, physically fit and strong. And in the end, 300 women applied for these positions, and only 4 were chosen. And these women were Mrs. Ruby Greenwood of Halifax, whose merchant navy husband is a prisoner of war in Japan, and who said she wants to be a barge belle in answer to the call of the sea. Miss Elsie Blackburn, a Birmingham munitions worker who got fed up with the factory and craves the more spacious atmosphere of canal life. Miss Barbara Gray, pupil of Edinburgh Art College, who hopes to combine a useful war job with an opportunity for drawing book illustrations. And Miss Nancy Smith of Northwich, who, because she has lived 7 years in a houseboat and because her fiancé is in the Merchant Navy, thinks it is the natural thing to do. So you can actually see these women pictured here on the left-hand side with their trainer, Mr. William Baldwin, and he had over 50 years of experience on the Northern Canals. And he told the newspaper, "There is no reason in the world why women shouldn't do the job just as well as men. They are very adaptable, and a few weeks' practical work will soon harden them." So with bottles of hand lotion and boundless amounts of optimism, the women's barge, the Edith, sailed away and was the first barge to sail on the Northern Canal with an all-female crew. And I just wanted to dig into the lives of these women on the canals from the Second World War a tiny bit more, and chose to focus on Ruby Greenwood, and that's her there circled there at the top. And it's really useful to read the multiple accounts of the so-called barge bells that appear in the press. So there wasn't just one article about them, there were a few. And from one article, we learned that Ruby's husband is a merchant navy prisoner of war in Japan. In another one, we learned that she was formerly employed in a civil defence control centre. So it's really useful to have, even though these articles are similar, it's always useful to check these different articles because you will get different information from them, usually. And both articles say that she's from Halifax. And so using the facts that we've learned from both of these articles, we can narrow down Ruby's identity. So we find a Ruby May Greenwood living in Halifax in the 1939 register with her husband Harry and father-in-law, also Harry. So crucially here, her occupation is telephonist, ARP Control Centre. That tallies with that newspaper report formerly employed in the Civil Defence Control Centre. Good. Searching for Harry Greenwood in our prisoner of war collection and returns this result that you can see on the right. Harry was captured by the Japanese and his birth date tallies with that in the 1939 register, and Keeley, his next of kin, is listed as Mrs. R.M. Greenwood. So that's Ruby May, and we found our Ruby. So I think it was really brave of her to volunteer for canal work whilst her husband was imprisoned. You know, that was such sort of uncertainty. Perhaps he might never come home. So Ruby married Harry, in 1935. Her maiden name is Cocker, and we find her in the 1921 census living with her parents Arnold and Adelaide in Halifax. Ruby is 12, and her father is an engineer at a power plant. So thankfully, Harry Greenwood survived his ordeal as a POW. The couple would go on to have a son together after the war. And the next we see of them is actually their emigration to Australia in 1949. I'm wondering perhaps whether they were £10 poms. So the top record shows a passenger list from April 1949. And it's always a bit tricky sometimes with these passenger lists as they quite often use initials. So it's RM, Greenwood, H, Greenwood. But in the correspondence address, you can see that name Cocker. That's Ruby's maiden name. So that ties us to that particular record. And the one below it is a passenger list as part of the quarantine process from a month later at Fremantle. The Greenwoods travelled on the Dorsetshire to get to Australia, and we see their destination address as Albany in Western Australia. And finally, thanks to our Australian records, we can round off Ruby's story from our Western Australian Death Index, and we learn that she passed away in 1976. And again, to confirm her identity there, we've got the name of her parents listed, so Adelaide and Arnold. So it's a really an honour and a privilege to just tell the story of this hard-working woman through our records and the other women who worked alongside her. So it's a wonderful story and a really, really interesting part of the World War II effort that I didn't really know much about. So thanks so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be talking to you, and thank you. I think you've provided me with some great pointers for my brick wall, so I'll be back soon. And have a lovely weekend, everybody. Take care.